The substitute. The morning began like any other at Greenwood High, with students begrudgingly shuffling into their first period classes. Today, however, there was a new face in room 203. Mr. Voss, the substitute teacher, greeted the students with an unsettlingly wide smile. "Good morning, everyone. Today, we're going to start with a lockdown drill," he announced, his eyes gleaming with an unnatural intensity. The students exchanged puzzled glances. Lockdown drills were routine, but Mr. Voss's enthusiasm seemed over the top. Nonetheless, they followed his instructions, moving to the designated safe corners of the room. Mr. Voss locked the door with a resounding click and drew the blinds tightly shut. He walked up and down the rows of desks, insisting on absolute silence, his smile never wavering. The atmosphere grew tense, the air thick with unease. Minutes ticked by, and a few students began to fidget, glancing at their phones. Suddenly, a series of eerie messages started popping up on their screens. "Help! This is the real Mr. Voss. I've been missing for days. That thing is not me." Whispers spread among the students as they showed each other the messages. Panic began to bubble beneath the surface. Mr. Voss noticed the shift in the room and his smile faded, replaced by a look of cold calculation. "Phones away. Now," he commanded, his voice dropping an octave, becoming almost inhuman. The students obeyed, but the fear in the room was palpable. As the minutes dragged on, the lockdown drill took a sinister turn. The school's intercom crackled to life, announcing that this was no longer a drill. The building was under an actual lockdown. Mr. Voss's eyes gleamed with a predatory satisfaction. Realizing the gravity of their situation, a few brave students decided to take matters into their own hands. Sarah, a quick-thinking senior, whispered to her friends, "We need to outsmart this thing. It's feeding on our fear." They hatched a plan. While a few students distracted Mr. Voss, Sarah and a small group slipped out a side door. They navigated the darkened halls, heading for the main office to alert the authorities. But as they rounded a corner, they came face to face with Mr. Voss, his form shifting grotesquely before their eyes. "You can't escape," it hissed, its voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. The students recoiled in horror, but Sarah stood her ground. "Yes, we can," she declared, her voice steady. "We're not afraid of you." Drawing on every ounce of courage, the students began to chant, "We're not afraid," over and over, their voices growing stronger. The entity faltered, its shape flickering and distorting as it struggled to maintain its hold. Taking advantage of its distraction, Sarah led the charge, and they bolted for the nearest exit. They burst into the daylight, gasping for breath, feeling a momentary surge of triumph. Just then, the real Mr. Voss stumbled out of the bushes, disheveled and terrified. "You have to leave," he panted. "It's too late. The entity has taken root in the school." Horrified, the students realized the truth. Though they had escaped, the creature remained, lurking in the shadows of Greenwood High, waiting for the next drill to strike again. The silent scream. The bell rang, signaling the start of the lockdown drill at East Ridge High School. Students groaned, shuffling to their designated spots in classrooms and hallways. Mr. Thompson, the principal, announced over the intercom, "This is a lockdown drill. Please follow procedures." Suddenly, a strange hush fell over the school. Phones lost their signals, intercoms went dead, and students found they couldn't make a sound. Panic set in as they realized they were truly trapped. In Mr. Adams's history class, a small group of students, led by Rebecca, a sharp-witted junior, noticed the eerie silence. Desperation in their eyes, they motioned to each other to find out what was happening. Rebecca led them to the basement, hoping to find a way to communicate with the outside world. The basement was dark and cluttered with old equipment and forgotten supplies. As they navigated through the maze of dusty shelves, they stumbled upon a hidden room. The door creaked open, revealing walls adorned with occult symbols and a large, ancient book on a pedestal. Rebecca, with trembling hands, opened the book. It was filled with cryptic writings and illustrations of rituals. A section titled "The Curse of the Silent Scream" caught her eye. It explained that the curse silenced all communication and required a sacrifice to be lifted. The students' eyes widened in horror as they realized the gravity of their situation. Determined to break the curse without losing one of their own, they began to decipher the book's instructions. As they worked, ghostly apparitions of former students appeared, their eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. They whispered warnings of the horrors that awaited if the curse was not broken. Time was running out, and the students knew they had to act quickly. They gathered in the hidden room, forming a circle around the pedestal. Following the book's instructions, they lit candles and recited the incantation written on the ancient pages. But the final step required a sacrifice. The group fell silent, looking at each other with a mix of fear and resolve. Finally, Michael, a senior known for his bravery, stepped forward. He couldn't speak, but his eyes conveyed his determination. He placed his hand on the pedestal, and the room filled with an otherworldly light. Rebecca tried to stop him, but it was too late. Michael collapsed and the light dimmed. The silence remained, and the apparitions of former students surrounded them, their faces twisted in eternal despair. The curse had not been broken. Instead, it had claimed another soul. As the remaining students fled the basement, the walls of the school seemed to close in on them. They realized, with a chilling dread, that the school had become their prison. Their spirits would join those of the past victims, doomed to repeat the lockdown drill for eternity. Outside, East Ridge High stood silent, an ordinary building hiding a sinister secret. The community would never know the true fate of the students within its walls. As the silent scream continued to echo through the halls, unseen and unheard. The infected. It began as a routine lockdown drill at Westlake High School, a precautionary measure practiced so often that students barely paid attention. This time, however, the drill would become a nightmare beyond their worst imaginations. The lockdown announcement came over the intercom, and students shuffled into their classrooms, doors locked and blinds drawn. In the silence, a faint but unmistakable sound of chaos erupted in the hallways. Shouts, crashes, and a guttural, animalistic growl. Panic quickly replaced the routine. Emma, a quick-thinking junior, peeked through the narrow window of the classroom door and saw her classmates and teachers moving erratically, their eyes wild and vacant. A wave of terror washed over her as she realized something was horribly wrong. The infected students and teachers were attacking anyone in sight, driven by an inexplicable rage. "Barricade the door," Emma whispered urgently. She and her classmates pushed desks and chairs against the door, their hearts pounding. They were safe for the moment, but the infected were relentless, drawn to any noise or movement. Emma knew they needed a plan. "We have to get to the science lab," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "If we can figure out what's causing this, we might be able to stop it." Silently, the uninfected students made their way through the school, avoiding detection by moving quietly and sticking to the shadows. The sight of their once familiar teachers and friends now turned into mindless aggressors was almost too much to bear. Reaching the science lab, Emma and her group quickly secured the door and began searching for answers. They discovered that the outbreak was caused by a pathogen in the school's water supply, turning anyone who consumed it into a violent, mindless being. The realization that the illness had spread so easily was horrifying. As they worked to develop a cure, the group learned the shocking truth behind the outbreak. A disgruntled former student, expelled years earlier, had intentionally contaminated the water supply in an act of revenge. The revelation added a new layer of urgency to their mission. Time was running out, and the infected were growing more aggressive. Emma and her friends worked tirelessly, mixing chemicals and analyzing samples. Finally, they developed a potential antidote. Hope flickered among the group, but it was short-lived. A chilling broadcast came over the emergency radio. The entire town was infected. The school was just the beginning. The scale of the outbreak was unimaginable, and the weight of their next decision pressed heavily on them. "We have to make a choice," Emma said, her voice breaking. "Do we try to cure the town, or do we leave and save ourselves?" The group fell silent, each grappling with the impossible decision. They knew that staying to help could mean certain death, but abandoning their town felt equally unbearable. Emma took a deep breath, looking at the faces of her friends, each of them terrified but resolute. "We can't give up now. We have the antidote. We have to try." With newfound determination, the group prepared to leave the relative safety of the science lab. They gathered the antidote and steeled themselves for the dangerous journey ahead. The infected were everywhere, and their path was fraught with peril. As they stepped into the hallway, ready to face the horror outside, they knew the stakes had never been higher. Their town's fate, and perhaps their own, hung in the balance. The haunting of Lockdown Hall. The bell rang, echoing through the corridors of Westbrook High School. It was time for the scheduled lockdown drill, and students hurried to their designated classrooms, doors locking behind them. As the teachers instructed everyone to remain silent, an eerie stillness settled over the building. In room 206, a cold draft swept through, causing the hairs on the back of Elle's neck to stand up. She glanced around, noticing the flickering lights and feeling an unusual chill. Her best friend, Sarah, nudged her. "Did you feel that?" she whispered. Before Elle could respond, ghostly whispers filled the room, too faint to understand but undeniably present. The students exchanged worried glances. Mr. Thompson, their history teacher, tried to maintain order. "Stay calm, everyone. It's just the wind." But Elle knew it was more than that. She had heard stories about the school being built on the ruins of an old orphanage that had burned down decades ago. Determined to uncover the truth, she motioned for Sarah to follow her. They slipped out of the classroom during a brief moment of chaos when the lights went out completely. Navigating the dark hallways, they reached the school library. Elle typed frantically on the computer, searching for information about the orphanage. "Here it is," she said, her voice trembling. "The orphanage burned down in 1948. They say the fire was started by the cruel headmistress, Ms. Grayson, who trapped the children inside." Sarah shivered. "Do you think the spirits of those children are here?" A sudden loud bang startled them. Books flew off the shelves, and the temperature dropped further. "We have to perform a ritual to communicate with them," Elle said. "It's the only way to offer them peace." They found an old book on occult rituals, detailing how to communicate with restless spirits. Grabbing the necessary items, they headed to the gymnasium, the largest and most open space in the school. Along the way, they saw other students experiencing terrifying visions of the orphanage fire. The haunting was intensifying. In the gym, Elle and Sarah drew a circle with chalk and placed candles around its perimeter. They recited the incantation from the book, their voices steady despite their fear. The candles flickered, and the air grew heavy with the presence of the spirits. Suddenly, ghostly figures of children appeared, their faces sad and pleading. "We're here to help you," Elle said softly. "We want to bring you peace." The children's spirits seemed to respond, their forms growing brighter. But then, a dark, oppressive force filled the room. The malevolent spirit of Miss Grayson emerged, her eyes burning with rage. "You cannot free them," she hissed. "They are mine." The ground shook, and the gymnasium doors slammed shut. Elle and Sarah were separated as the spirit of Miss Grayson tormented them with visions of the burning orphanage. Elle struggled to stay focused, repeating the incantation over and over. With a final, desperate effort, Elle completed the ritual. The children's spirits glowed brightly before vanishing, their expressions peaceful at last. But as the light faded, Elle felt a cold hand grasp her shoulder. She turned to see Sarah, but something was wrong. Sarah's eyes were filled with a malevolent gleam. "Elle," Sarah said, her voice twisted with Miss Grayson's malice. "This isn't over." The lockdown drill ended, and the doors unlocked, but the school was left with an unsettling presence. The spirit of Miss Grayson had found a new host in Sarah. The malevolent force lingered, waiting patiently for the next lockdown drill to strike again. The test of fear. The lockdown drill at Crestwood High School began like any other. Students and teachers dutifully followed protocols, locking doors and drawing blinds. In the basement, where dusty old storage rooms lay forgotten, Jake wandered, looking for a quiet place to skip the drill. As he rummaged through a pile of old books, his foot struck a peculiar seal on the floor. Intrigued, he brushed away the dust, revealing a complex pattern of symbols. Without realizing the gravity of his actions, he broke the seal. A chilling wind swept through the basement, and a sinister whisper echoed in the air. The entity, long dormant, was awakened. Upstairs, the atmosphere shifted. The lights flickered, and an unnatural cold seeped into the building. Students and teachers felt an inexplicable dread, their hearts pounding with an unshakable sense of doom. The entity began its work, weaving illusions based on their deepest fears. In room 204, Becky found herself alone, the walls closing in on her. Claustrophobia took hold, and she gasped for breath, her vision narrowing. Next door, Mr. Harris, the biology teacher, was paralyzed by visions of monstrous insects crawling over him, their chittering growing louder. Jake, unaware of the chaos he had unleashed, felt the first tendrils of fear wrap around him. Shadows danced at the edges of his vision, morphing into the silhouette of his abusive father, a figure he had spent years trying to escape. As the terror spread, a small group of students, Becky, Jake, Sarah, and Michael, realized they needed to act. Becky's fear had driven her into the hallway, where she collided with Jake. The two found Sarah and Michael, who were equally terrified but determined to fight back. "We need to get to the basement," Jake said, his voice trembling. "I think I did something down there." Navigating through the darkened halls, the group faced their worst fears at every turn. Michael's fear of heights manifested as endless staircases that led nowhere, while Sarah was tormented by the sight of her deceased grandmother, pleading for help. In the basement, the whispers grew louder, the air thick with malevolence. The entity's presence was overwhelming, feeding off their fear. Becky found the broken seal and the group worked frantically to repair it, but the entity fought back, intensifying their nightmares. As they struggled, they discovered old documents hidden among the storage boxes. The papers revealed that the school's founders had placed the entity there, unable to destroy it but hoping to contain its power. With the entity's illusions pushing them to the brink, Becky had a moment of clarity. "It feeds on our fear," she said. "We have to face it together." Gathering their courage, the students confronted the entity head-on. They held hands, forming a circle around the seal, chanting the words they found in the documents. The entity writhed and screamed, its power weakening as they faced their fears united. With a final, defiant shout, they sealed the entity back into its prison. The basement fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Exhausted, the students collapsed, relief mingling with the lingering terror. The lockdown ended, but the students were forever changed. The entity's whispers still haunted their minds, a sinister promise that it would return when their fear was strong enough to break free again. Crestwood High stood as a silent sentinel, a reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath, waiting for the moment when fear would once more release the nightmare within.